When choosing a camshaft for an engine build, generally speaking, the only things we really have to go by are the dimensions and specifications provided by the cam grinder. So things like, lift and duration, lobe separation angle, all very clearly defined terms that when used will give us a pretty good idea of how any given cam is going to perform in any given engine under any given circumstance. But what if I told you that there was another level of knowledge to all of this, another level of camshaft science that is not generally known? Because the cam grinders, the manufacturers, they keep this knowledge to themselves. Some speculate that this is how big camshaft keeps us down. Now, I don't know about any of that, but the concept or the phenomenon of camshaft encabulation is not generally known. And I thought we should probably do a video on this now, just, bring you guys up to speed. A lot of very well-known, famous engine builders don't even know this stuff, but you will before the end of this video. So let's talk about what encabulation is, where it came from, and what you could do to make sure that you're on the good side of encabulation and not the catastrophic side when you choose a cam for your engine. So, what is encabulation? All right, so this is a set of harmonic frequencies and wave pulses that take place in the ports and chambers of all internal combustion engines. So encabulation varies with each single RPM and from cylinder to cylinder. Encabulation affects each cylinder individually, but excessive encabulation in one cylinder can affect other cylinders in that same engine. They don't have to be next to each other in the engine. They don't even have to be adjacent to each other in the firing order. Severe and negative catastrophic encabulation will affect the harmony of the entire engine. That's why this is so important. All right, so these ionically charged torsional sound pulses can cause inversional displacement, creating disharmonies and concussive resonance detractions within the engine. So clearly, this is no laughing matter, right? You're going to be glad you saw this video. All right, so that's what camshaft encabulation consists of. Where did it come from? This phenomenon. All right, so it was first discovered by Otto Frankmann. So Frankmann, a German, very well established, very well-rounded guy, was a scientist, a physicist, and an engineer, and an accomplished show tune composer. And Frankmann was involved, very heavily involved, in Germany's pre-war Formula One effort. Frankmann was the valvetrain guy. He was obsessed with valvetrains at this period of time. And Frankmann wrote extensively about his findings, all aspects of camshaft or valvetrain dynamics, but most specifically about encabulation. Now, this is not Frankmann's book, but if it was, it would be filled with his theories and experiments and dynographs and hand-drawn engineering illustrations like they did back then. Very good reading. I recommend it to anybody. So, Frankmann discovered this phenomenon of encabulation. All right, so what Frankmann determined was that when encabulation is right, okay, it's smooth, his words, like warm butterscotch pudding being poured over a waffle. When it's bad, it's very, very bad. All right, so, okay, well, Frankmann didn't actually write that it was very, very bad, but he occasionally wrote his thoughts out just in sounds in German, and there's no direct English translation, so just very, very bad. All right, so this is where it came from. This is how it was all discovered and determined. Now, when the war came, obviously the whole racing thing came to a halt, and Frankmann laid low for a couple of years. After the war, he emigrated to the US with several other members of the German brain trust of the era. But rather than go to work in the aerospace industry or Disney like the other guys, Frankmann ended up managing Howard Johnson's in Clearfield, PA. So I guess at that point in his life, he had had enough of you know, the craziness, and just wanted to check people in and check people out. The Howard Johnson's is ironic though because of his outspoken disdain for Hojo the Clown, but I guess he just let that slide. So that was Franckmann's story, and that's where the concept of encabulation came from. You might have heard this term used with the turbo, because turbo encabulation is something that is known, but camshaft encabulation, it's not. All right, so how do we determine what the encabulation factors are in your engine? All right, it's very simple stuff. So the first thing we do is we measure from 46 degrees past max lift on the exhaust lobe to the beginning or the bottom of the base circle. You times this by the rocker ratio, okay? Now, you subtract 1/3 of the lash, assuming that it's a solid lifter engine, and multiply that by lobe taper, assuming that it's a, not a roller, because the lobe taper wouldn't matter, and there's a whole different set of calculations that can be made if that's the case. All right, so you multiply this number by degrees of intake duration squared, and then subtract the total intake and exhaust lift. All right, so you'd be doing this and then taking those numbers and putting them into a calculator, although he did it by hand and it would all be in his book. All right, so now when you combine all of that, this should give you an approximate multiple of engine RPM divided by cylinder bore. Then you simply multiply the bore times 6.2832. Now, a number larger than this leads to catastrophic encabulation, okay? And a number less than this leads to harmonious and grateful encabulation, as Franckmann wrote. So Franckmann had determined that ideally a camshaft should be ground with separate lobes for intake and exhaust and for each cylinder. So an 8-cylinder engine would have 16 different lobes, and that they should all be constantly variable in order for this whole thing to work. And that led to his very difficult to grind dual vortex radial pinion bend camshaft as was displayed at the 1964 World's Fair. So I think I covered pretty much the basics of encabulation, the history of it, and what you need to know to stay on its good side, because bad encabulation can be a very, very bad thing. All right, guys. So I hope you got something out of that, and I'll see you tomorrow.
Are you growling at her? You being good? Good girl, Winnie. Good girl, Winnie. You're so good. You want Frisbee? Okay. Oh my goodness.